You wake up and, without even trying, you remember yesterday. Every second of it. Not the blurry outline most people carry around, but the exact words your coworker said at lunch, the exact color of the sky at 4:47 in the afternoon, the exact taste of your coffee going slightly cold. You remember the day before that too, and the one before that. Every single day of your life, stored in perfect, permanent detail. What would that actually be like? At first, it sounds like a gift. Who wouldn't want to remember every birthday, every first kiss, every proud moment in perfect clarity? No more struggling to recall a name. No more forgetting where you left your keys. No more losing the small, beautiful details of your favorite memories to the slow erosion of time. But total recall is not simply strong memory. It's something science actually studies, and the real cases reveal a much stranger picture than we might expect. This condition exists in a rare form, and researchers call it highly superior autobiographical memory. People with this ability can recall the exact day of the week for almost any date you give them, along with detailed personal memories from that day. Neuroscientists who have studied these individuals found something unexpected. Their memory is not simply better across the board. It is specifically, almost exclusively, tied to their own personal timeline. Ask them to memorize a random list of words, and they perform no better than anyone else. Their gift is narrow, but within that narrow lane, it is extraordinarily deep. Now imagine that ability applied to every day of your life, starting today. The first thing you would notice is not how much you remember, but how much everyone else forgets. You would recall the exact sentence a friend used to promise something 2 years ago. They would not. To you, it would feel like betrayal, or at least carelessness. To them, it would just be normal human forgetting. That mismatch would touch nearly every relationship in your life. Suddenly, you are the only one holding the complete transcript, while everyone else is working from memory that fades, blends, and quietly rewrites itself over time. Here's where the science gets genuinely surprising. Most people assume memory works like a video recording, something you replay exactly as it happened. It does not. Ordinary human memory is reconstructive. Every time you recall something, your brain rebuilds it, and that rebuilding process can subtly change the memory itself. This is actually useful. It lets your brain update old memories with new understanding, smooth over painful details, and adapt the past to fit who you are now. If your memory became perfectly literal instead of reconstructive, you would lose that built-in editing process. Every insult would replay with its original sting. Every embarrassment would stay exactly as sharp as the day it happened. Nothing would fade. Nothing would soften. Think about what that means for a single hard year of your life. A breakup, a loss, a failure you would rather not think about. Right now, time genuinely helps. Painful memories usually lose intensity as your brain reprocesses them, which is part of how people naturally recover from grief and disappointment. If your recall became total and unchanging, would that healing process still work the same way? Or would every difficult day sit in your mind exactly as raw as it was, permanently on standby, ready to replay in full detail the moment something reminds you of it? There's a psychological term for carrying too much detail without enough distance. It's sometimes described as the burden of memory, and researchers who study highly superior autobiographical memory have noted that some individuals describe their recall as exhausting rather than empowering. Constantly having access to every argument, every mistake, every awkward pause in a conversation is not the same as being wise about the past. It can mean being trapped in it. Now zoom out and think about how this would reshape your decisions. If you remembered every single day with equal clarity, would today actually feel special? Right now, part of what makes an experience meaningful is its contrast with everything around it. A perfect vacation stands out because most days are ordinary. A first date is memorable, partly because so many other days are forgettable. If every day carried the same vivid weight in your memory, the peaks and valleys of your life might start to flatten out. Not because the events themselves changed, but because your brain would no longer be doing the quiet work of deciding what matters enough to hold on to. This is actually one of memory's most underrated jobs. Forgetting is not simply a flaw in the system. Neuroscientists increasingly describe forgetting as an active adaptive process. one that helps the brain filter out irrelevant information so that important patterns and lessons can stand out more clearly. If you kept everything, your brain would lose one of its most efficient tools for figuring out what actually matters. Somewhere in that flood of comprehensive, formless, every conversation would carry the same weight as every meal, every commute, every ordinary Tuesday. Now think about relationships specifically, because this is where total recall gets complicated in ways people rarely consider. Imagine your partner forgets an old promise, not out of malice, but because human memory naturally fades. You remember it perfectly. Do you bring it up? If you do, you become the person who never lets anything go, holding receipts on a decade of small mistakes nobody else even remembers making. If you don't, you're carrying a private, permanent archive of grievances that the other person genuinely has no memory of creating. Either path puts a strange kind of pressure on intimacy, because forgetting is often part of how relationships stay livable. It's not always dishonesty. Sometimes it's mercy. There's also a quieter question buried in all of this. If you remembered everything, would your sense of who you are stay the same? Right now, your identity is partly built from memory, but it's a curated, evolving version of memory, not a complete archive. You remember yourself as more consistent than you actually were because your brain smooths over contradictions. With total recall, you would confront every contradiction directly. Every time you changed your mind, broke a promise to yourself, or acted differently than your stated values, that gap would sit in your memory in full detail, impossible to soften or explain away. Some people might find that clarifying. Others might find it destabilizing, a constant reminder of every version of themselves they've ever been, whether or not they still recognize that version today. Let's go even deeper into the mechanics of this, because not all memories would carry the same emotional charge, even if they were all equally detailed. Consider trauma specifically. Right now, one theory in psychology suggests that traumatic memories are sometimes processed differently than ordinary ones, stored with unusual vividness, and prone to intrusive replay, which is part of what makes conditions like post-traumatic stress so difficult to treat. If total recall meant every memory carried that same vivid, intrusive quality by default, even mundane days could start to feel like they were pressing in on you constantly. The brain's normal ability to file away a memory as past and let it fade into the background would simply stop functioning. Nothing would ever fully become the past. Everything would stay present tense. Now consider something more hopeful: learning itself. Students spend years trying to memorize facts for exams, and forgetting is usually treated as the enemy of education. With total recall, you would never need to cram again. Every lecture, every page of a textbook, every formula would already be locked in from the first exposure. In that narrow sense, school would become almost pointless as a memorization exercise. But here's the twist. Learning is not just about storing information. It's also about understanding it deeply enough to use it in new situations. Cognitive scientists who study learning have found that struggling to retrieve a memory, and sometimes even getting it wrong before correcting it, actually strengthens understanding more than passive, effortless recall does. If everything came to you instantly and perfectly, would you actually understand it more deeply? Or would you simply be carrying around a flawless recording without the deeper comprehension that usually comes from the struggle to remember? Now widen the lens one more time, because if this ability applied to more than just you, the effects on society would be significant. Imagine courtrooms where every witness had perfect recall. Eyewitness testimony is currently one of the most unreliable forms of evidence, not because witnesses lie, but because ordinary memory reconstructs and distorts details every time it is accessed. With total recall, testimony could become dramatically more accurate, potentially preventing wrongful convictions that currently happen when faulty memory leads someone to confidently misidentify a stranger. But the same total recall would also mean nothing said in confidence, nothing done in a moment of weakness, would ever truly fade from someone else's memory either. Every embarrassing mistake would live forever in the minds of everyone who witnessed it, replayable in perfect detail, indefinitely. Public figures would face a particularly strange version of this. Right now, Most people's memories of a public mistake soften and blur within a few years, which is part of how second chances become possible. If an entire audience remembered every misstep with total clarity every day, forever, the space for genuine redemption might shrink. Forgetting, in this light, is not a bug in how society processes wrongdoing. It's part of the mechanism that allows people to change and be seen differently over time. Now, bring this back to something practical. What would you actually do with a memory like this? You could recall exact directions after driving somewhere once. You could settle any disagreement about what someone said and when they said it. You could relearn a skill instantly just by replaying the exact moment you first understood it. In careers built on precision, law, medicine, journalism, this kind of recall would be enormously valuable. But value and comfort are not the same thing. A mind built for perfect retrieval was not necessarily built for peace. So what if you remembered every single day of your life? You would not simply gain more of your past. You would lose the quiet editing process that turns raw experience into something livable, something you can carry without being crushed by it. Perfect memory would not make you wiser about your own story. It might just make the story louder, every page equally loud, until the moments that once stood out simply blend into everything else. Maybe the real gift was never remembering everything. Maybe it was always the forgetting, quietly deciding one ordinary day at a time what deserved to stay.